My fingers were wrapped around a coffee mug that said "World's Okayest Boss," a joke gift from 3 Christmases ago. And I remember the ceramic was hot enough to hurt, but I didn't let go. 22 people were watching. My wife stood at the head of the table in a red dress that wasn't hers 2 years ago, and she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at my boss. "I want a divorce," she said, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "And I want it before he figures out where the money went." Nobody moved. Somewhere behind me, my boss cleared his throat like a man about to make an announcement he'd been rehearsing for months. "Actually," he said, "there's something you both need to know. My name is Daniel Reyes. I was 44 years old, and 11 years earlier I'd walked away from a 6-figure engineering job to start a structural inspection firm out of a rented garage with $14,000 in savings and a truck that broke down twice a month. By the time this story happened, Reyes Structural Solutions had 11 employees, contracts with 3 municipal governments, and a valuation, according to the accountant I trusted, of just under $3.1 million. My wife, Michelle, was 41. We'd been married 16 years. We had a 14-year-old daughter, Ava, who was starting to ask questions about why Mom was always at yoga until 9 at night. I'd put Michelle's name on the business as a 50% partner back in year 2, back when she was answering phones and doing our books for free because we couldn't afford a bookkeeper. It felt right at the time. It felt like partnership. I didn't know yet that partnership was about to become a weapon. It started on a Tuesday in March, 6 weeks before that conference room. I'd come back early from a site inspection in Millbrook. The client canceled, foundation work postponed for permits, and I decided to swing by the office instead of going straight home. It was 4:40 in the afternoon. The lights in my own private office, the one with my name stenciled on frosted glass, were on, and through the gap where the blinds didn't quite meet, I could see 2 shapes. Michelle was sitting on the edge of my desk. Not in a chair. On the desk, one leg crossed over the other, holding a glass of the Macallan 18 I keep in the bottom drawer for closing dinners with city contract officers. My boss. Well, not my boss, my business partner, Gregory Vance, the man who'd loaned us $80,000 in year 3 to cover payroll during a slow winter, the man I called my mentor at our anniversary party, was standing close enough that his tie brushed her knee. "He still thinks the LLC restructuring was my idea," Michelle said, and laughed the kind of laugh she used to save for me. Gregory swirled his own glass. "It was your idea, honey. I just signed where you told me to." I stood outside my own office door for 4 minutes and 11 seconds. I counted them on my watch because counting was the only thing keeping my hands still. Then I turned around and walked back to my truck like nothing had happened, because something in my gut, some cold, quiet, engineering brain part of me that spends its whole career finding hairline cracks before buildings fall down, told me that if I walked in there and started shouting, I'd only ever see the crack. I wouldn't see how deep it went. That night, after Michelle texted that she was stuck late finalizing Q1 reports, I opened the business's shared cloud drive from my laptop at the kitchen table, Ava asleep upstairs. Buried 3 folders deep, in a file named Q1_miscellaneous_backup, a name designed to be skipped over, I found articles of organization for a new entity, Vance Reyes Holdings LLC, filed 8 months earlier. Michelle and Gregory listed as managing members. Me listed nowhere. I pulled 6 months of the firm's operating account statements, something I hadn't personally reviewed in over a year because I'd trusted Michelle to handle the books, same as always. I found 19 separate wire transfers, ranging from $6,000 to $41,500, all routed to Vance Reyes Holdings, totaling $287,400. The memo line on each one read, "Equipment leasing, approved." I asked Michelle about it over dinner, keeping my voice as flat as a foundation slab. "What's Vance Reyes Holdings?" She didn't even blink. "Oh, that. Gregory and I set up a subsidiary to handle equipment depreciation more efficiently. It's a tax structuring thing. Daniel, it shelters us from the new municipal liability exposure changes. You wouldn't want to sit through the accountant's explanation. Trust me, it's all Section 179 stuff." I nodded slowly, like a man impressed by big words. "Makes sense," I said. "You always were better with the numbers." I pretended to believe her for 11 days. In that time, I drove out to the county recorder's office on my lunch break and pulled the full incorporation file, the one with the actual bylaws attached, not just the public filing summary. Buried in Article 7 was language granting Vance Reyes Holdings first right of refusal to purchase any and all inspection contracts and client relationships from Reyes Structural Solutions in the event of the founder's incapacity, divorce, or death. They weren't sheltering equipment. They were building the machine that would eat my company the moment I was gone, sick, or single. The last piece landed by accident. I'd left my phone charging on the office credenza, screen down, recording a voice memo I'd forgotten to stop after dictating a site note. That evening, I found 40 minutes of audio I never meant to capture. Michelle and Gregory, alone in my office, door shut, thinking the room was empty. "He still doesn't suspect anything," Gregory said, and I could hear ice clinking in a glass. 11 years building this thing, and he can't even read his own bank statements. "He trusts me," Michelle said. "It's actually kind of pathetic. I could tell him tomorrow, and he'd probably apologize to me." I sat in my truck in my own driveway for a long time after that, engine off, and I want to be honest with you, it didn't feel like rage. It felt like standing on a bridge deck and hearing the exact frequency of a crack you know is about to become a collapse. Cold, precise, almost calm. I made a decision that night that I'd never once made in 16 years of marriage. I decided to lie. Starting the next morning, I became smaller. I let my shoulders round forward when I walked through the office. I started forgetting things on purpose, leaving my reading glasses in meetings, asking Gregory to remind me again about invoices I already had memorized. I started calling Michelle Han in front of staff, extra sweet, extra soft, the tone of a man who has no idea his house is on fire. I bought a leather portfolio, the kind with a legal pad clipped inside, and I started carrying it everywhere, scribbling in it constantly. Half of it real inspection notes, half of it nothing, just so people would see me writing and assume I was still just Daniel, the earnest workhorse who never looked up. Inside, my brain was running like a structural audit. Every crack, mapped. Every load-bearing lie tagged. I told myself, a building doesn't collapse because of one crack. It collapses because everyone stopped checking. I was going to check everything, one more time, before I let it fall on my terms instead of theirs. I set 3 things in motion over the following 4 weeks. First, I hired a forensic accountant, Priya Malhotra, off the books, paid from a personal account Michelle didn't know existed. One I'd opened quietly at a credit union across town under my name only. She traced every one of the 19 equipment leasing transfers back to Vance Reyes Holdings and produced a report with bank routing numbers, dates, and a conclusion in bold black letters. Unauthorized diversion of member funds, consistent with breach of fiduciary duty. Second, I had a friend from my old engineering days, a guy named Marcus who did security consulting, install a discrete audio and video unit disguised as a smoke detector in my own office. Fully legal in our state for a business owner to record conversations occurring on premises they own, one-party consent, and Marcus made sure of that twice before he'd touch it. Third, and this was the bait, I accidentally left a printed draft of a new partnership buyout agreement on my desk, one that appeared to voluntarily transfer 60% of my ownership stake to Michelle in the event of marital dissolution, dated and signed, sitting in plain sight like a gift. Then I waited. 6 days later, my phone buzzed under the conference table during a Thursday staff meeting. A silent alert from the Office Feed app, motion detected in my private office, 12:14 p.m., during lunch. I excused myself to check on a supplier call and watched, live, on my phone screen in the stairwell, as Gregory picked up the draft agreement, photographed it, and said to Michelle over speakerphone, "It's happening faster than we thought. He's basically handing it to us." I didn't say a word. I just watched the little red recording light blink in the corner of the feed, and I thought about the mug on my desk. World's okayest boss. I thought, not for much longer. The dinner was Michelle's idea, a family celebration, she called it, to mark the firm's 11th anniversary, held in the same glass-walled conference room where we'd hosted every milestone for a decade. 22 employees, catered, champagne, Ava included because Michelle wanted a nice memory for her. I understood immediately. This was the night. This was where Michelle planned to announce the divorce publicly, humiliate me in front of my own staff, and let Gregory step in as the calm, capable partner who'd always been there for the company. She didn't disappoint. Midway through dessert, she stood, glass in hand, and said the words I'd been braced for. I want a divorce. And I want it before he figures out where the money went. The room went silent. Gregory stood too, cleared his throat, and said, "Actually, there's something you both need to know." Clearly about to spin some story of his own, positioning himself as the reasonable adult in the room. I set down the mug. I didn't raise my voice. I've found, over 11 years of standing in front of city inspectors and nervous clients, that the quietest voice in the room is the one people lean in to hear. Before you finish that sentence, Gregory, I said, I'd like to show everyone something. I opened my laptop, already connected to the conference room display, and I let the room see it for themselves instead of hearing it from me. On March 4th, I said, Michelle and Gregory formed Vance Reyes Holdings LLC. I'm not a member. The incorporation documents filled the screen. Between March and July, 19 transfers totaling $287,400 moved from this company's operating account into that entity, disguised as equipment leasing. The wire logs, highlighted, Priya's report stamped across the bottom. Article 7 of that entity's bylaws grants first right of refusal on this firm's contracts in the event of my divorce, incapacity, or death. The room had gone the kind of silent where you can hear the ice settling in the drink glasses. And 6 days ago, I said, still not raising my voice, the two of you were recorded, in my office, on the audio and video system I own and disclosed to legal counsel, discussing how, and I'm quoting, he can't even read his own bank statements. I pressed play. 40 seconds of Gregory's own voice filled the room. He still doesn't suspect anything. 11 years building this thing, and he can't even read his own bank statements. Michelle's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Gregory started to speak. Daniel, this is completely out of context. If you'd let me explain the leasing structure, you don't have to explain it to me, I said. You have to explain it to them. I nodded toward the door, where two men in plain clothes were already walking in, Detective Alvarez and his partner, whom I'd contacted 8 days earlier with Priya's report and copies of the recording, and who I'd asked, as a courtesy, to arrive precisely at 8:15. Gregory Vance, Alvarez said, badge out. We need to talk to you about a fraud complaint filed by Reyes Structural Solutions. I picked up the unsigned buyout draft from the table where Gregory had left it after photographing it, the one that would have handed Michelle 60% of everything I'd built. I tore it once, lengthwise, then again. The sound was small. Nobody in that room needed it to be loud. I built this company with $14,000 and a truck that stalled at every red light, I said, laying the torn pieces on the table like a receipt. You almost got the truck. You were never getting the company. In the 6 weeks that followed, everything moved fast, the way it does once the first domino tips. Gregory Vance was formally charged with felony embezzlement and breach of fiduciary duty. 2 months later, he accepted a plea agreement requiring full restitution of $287,400 plus $40,000 in penalties, and a 5-year ban from serving as an officer or director of any company registered in our state. The state licensing board opened its own inquiry, and Gregory's engineering certification, the one that had let him sign off on inspection reports for 11 years, was suspended pending review. Michelle was named in the civil suit alongside him. Vance Reyes Holdings was dissolved by court order within 90 days. Its assets clawed back into the firm's accounts. Our divorce, once she realized contesting it would mean airing every transfer in open court, was finalized in 14 weeks. I kept full ownership of Reyes Structural Solutions, and the court's language in the settlement specifically cited financial misconduct during the marriage as grounds for an unequal division of assets in my favor. At the office, I called a full staff meeting the Monday after the dinner. Nobody there had done anything wrong. Half of them had spent the anniversary party watching their boss's marriage end over dessert, and I wasn't going to let that be their last memory of working for me. I gave every employee a retroactive 4% raise, backdated 3 months, funded in part by the restitution money, and I told them plainly, none of this was yours to carry. I just needed you to see it happen so you'd never have to wonder why things changed. 2 of them cried. I didn't expect that. I hadn't done it for gratitude. I'd done it because a company, like a building, only stands if the people inside it trust the foundation, and I wasn't going to let Michelle and Gregory be the last thing that foundation was known for. It was raining the night Michelle showed up at my door, 8 weeks after the settlement. Real rain, the kind that turns a driveway into a mirror. She stood on the porch in a coat that wasn't the one she used to wear, thinner somehow, her hair flat against her forehead, no umbrella. Gregory's restitution had wiped out what she thought she'd walk away with. Her share of the civil judgment had wiped out most of the rest. She said Ava's name first, which I respected, and then she said mine. Daniel, please. I have nowhere else to go tonight. I stood in the doorway with the porch light, throwing a small yellow circle around both of us. And for 1 second, I let myself remember the woman who used to sit across from me at a fold-out table in a rented garage, tallying invoices by hand, believing in something we were building together. That woman was gone a long time before that dinner. I understood that now. You have a sister in Denver, I said. You have savings you didn't disclose in Discovery that I chose not to fight over. You have options, Michelle. What you don't have anymore is a key to this house. I didn't slam the door. I closed it, the same quiet click it had made in that conference room months earlier, except this time the click belonged to me. Inside, Ava was asleep upstairs, and in the kitchen, my new partner, Priya, the forensic accountant who'd stayed long after the case closed, first as a colleague I trusted, and then as someone I realized I trusted with everything else too, was pouring 2 cups of tea. She didn't ask who'd been at the door. She'd probably heard enough of it through the window to know. You okay? She asked. Yeah, I said and meant it. The building's finally quiet. Here's what I learned the hard way. The people who are counting on you never looking closely are usually the ones you should look at most closely. Trust isn't supposed to be blind. It's supposed to be earned, checked, and rechecked, the same way you'd never trust a bridge just because it looked fine from the road. And when you finally do have the proof, you don't need to shout. The truth is loud enough on its own. Have you ever had to play weak to catch someone in the act? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. If this hit home, hit like, subscribe for more stories like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.